Now we talk about some crazy things and products on this channel, but one of the craziest things that I've ever done is attempt a 2-year project where I built a minifig scale version of the Statue of Liberty, aka the final battle from Spider-Man No Way Home. And I did exactly that over on my other channel, Tommy C Bricks. But although that video went through a lot of the build process, it didn't really go through any of the hidden details and thought process behind the model. So that's exactly what this video is for. Just before this video begins, I'd like to let you know that there's an extended version of this video over on my Patreon. This video is a bit more concise for YouTube to just try and make it as entertaining as possible, but if you want to know every single detail down to the most pointless information, plus the fact there's no ads, it's worth checking out that Patreon video. But without further ado, let's jump into the details. I am incredibly happy about the statue. I know minifig scale can sometimes be very subjective depending on who you ask, but when I set out to build this model in the first place, it was really important to me that this was minifig scale. It's safe to say that I like building displays or mini dioramas, and most of the time those models center around minifigs. So scale does come up a lot, and many people have so many different interpretations of what scale means. I didn't want to be buying unnecessary bricks that I didn't need, which by the way turns out to be in the tens of thousands, and ended up with a scale that I think is pretty good. And I don't know if you noticed, but our Statue of Liberty doesn't exactly look like the genuine article. She got a lot more minifigure-y. And the reason for this is just a rule that I have in the back of my mind, that when it comes to building humanoid structures out of Lego bricks, it's better to take inspiration off of the minifigures themselves, opposed to flipping to more human-like proportions. See, it's funny, in recent years Lego have actually flipped this rule on its head, as back in 2016 all the way up to 2020, when it came for Lego to depict giant characters, they made them look like giant minifigures. I especially love the one from 2016 in the airport battle. That buildable Ant-Man sticks in my head even to this day. But now looking at recent depictions of buildable characters like the giant Ant-Man, or say something like the expansion to the Statue of Liberty set where we get Sandman, you can see that even though minifigures are included in the set, the buildable characters somehow gain human proportions. When I build a giant human character, and especially if I'm going to display minifigures next to it, I'm going to make my characters resemble minifigures. I did this very thing in the Civil War Airport series when I built my version of Giant Man, and there's no reasoning why I wouldn't continue that with the Statue of Liberty. Now there are many ways to go about building a giant minifigure. My first thought went to something like the buildable Harry Potter figures, just upscaled massively, but that seriously didn't work. And as this model was always intended to be taken about the country, I really had to think about transport. So I ended up settling on a layered system, similar to how you'd see those big minifigures in Lego stores or at Legoland. This way I can ensure that it's a really strong model, I can make it hollow so I'm not wasting money, and I didn't have to deal with many complex shapes. And that's how we ended up with this. The minifigure does lack a little bit of detail, which I would have liked, but without buying a bunch of dark brown pieces and building up the detail, and also making this model much harder to build, I don't actually think we get much level of detail out of this size of a model. And if I'm honest, I don't think it needs any printing detail. It's still insane to just see this statue like this. It's a recognizable enough shape, and with all of the minifigures and details, you're gonna know exactly what scene this is. Now, let's talk stickers. I knew I wanted Sandman to have a face. I didn't want to just leave it as a lifeless void, but I also knew I didn't want to brick build it because I just think it would look funny. It only kind of left me with two options. I could either print on bricks, which just isn't happening, or I could make myself a custom sticker sheet. Now I know my buddy Micah will be screaming decals at the screen right now, and specifically for him, I didn't want to use decals because Lego themselves do not use them. I did want to make this model as Lego-like as possible, so that's why I opted to use stickers. But this did mean that I had to learn Illustrator. I've never used Illustrator before, I'm much more of a Photoshop man, but the guy I used to print out the stickers required me to use Illustrator. I've never done any sort of custom sticker sheet before, so there was a lot to learn, and looking back on my file, there's probably way more optimization I could have done, but this was my first time using it, so cut me a little slack. But overall, I think the stickers came out somewhat decent, and they look great on the model, if you ask me. Some people will say getting a custom sticker sheet is cheating, but honestly, this model's going to conventions. I want it to look the best it possibly can. And so long as I hold myself to some Lego rules, aka not sticking more than one sticker on one element, I think I'm okay to give myself a pass on this one. Besides, Lego use stickers for most of their details nowadays, so there's no reason in my mind that I can't too. The only downside I see with these stickers is the color matching isn't perfect, so if you guys know any decent sticker companies where I might be able to get some of these stickers reprinted, do leave them in the comment section below. I'll be sure to take a look. Now, if there's one thing I really want to discuss, it's the 3D printing side of this model. As you guys know from the main video, Eligoo has graciously sent out a new machine for us to play around with, and not only make projects like this better, but more projects in the future, I'm sure. Now, I have had this printer a few months, so I have had time to test it, and figure out whether this printer was actually going to do the job that I wanted it to. Now, there are actually 3 3D printed items I want to talk about on this model, 2 of them to do with the helicopter and the problems I encountered whilst building that. The first step was working out how the hell I was actually going to get it up that high in the first place. My first thought went to acrylic stands, and I did strike a bit of luck because I know that there are some companies that make custom stands for you. But unfortunately, nobody was willing to make a stand as high as I needed one. This led me to the decision that I was going to use an acrylic tube. Acrylic tubes you can get in multiple different sizes, and you can cut them to the right length. The only issue is I now needed to work out how to go from an acrylic tube to a Lego model. That's when it hit me that I could design a 3D printed part that would sit between the acrylic tube and the Lego model. But that's not the only issue. I always knew that I wanted the helicopter blades to spin. So I needed to make sure that the acrylic tube was thick enough, but also the 3D part was strong enough to support the helicopter whilst moving. When designing the 3D printed part that would go between the tube and the helicopter itself, I needed to work out how the hell I was going to attach the helicopter to the 3D printed part. My first thought was modeling my own plate, sticking it on top of the 3D printed part and hoping that the helicopter would just click in, but everything I printed just didn't seem to fit. So I ended up taking a play of what currently companies are doing at the moment to attach Lego models to their acrylic stands. They model a faux plate that goes on top of the part that can accept studs. So going in that direction, I modeled a couple of plates to just try and get the tolerance for the stud just right. What I wanted was a press fit that would be so tight it would be the equivalent of using glue. And I could probably get these out if I tried, but trust me, they ain't coming out on their own. And when I had this plate, I ended up printing a full part, and when I was happy with the prototype, I broke out some black filament and reprinted both parts in this, just to try and have it hopefully blend into the background a bit more. Now, I mentioned that there were 3 3D printed parts on this model, and granted I only used this machine to print 2 of them, the other one I really want to talk about. In this set, the Machina Davis is portrayed as a Minecraft cube with stickers on it, and although this is a very Lego-y feeling option, I always predicted they were going to do something along these lines. I was just hoping it would have been printed and not stickers. So I always knew I was going to want a custom one to go with my custom minifigs. The only issue was I couldn't find one anywhere, so I decided to make my own. About a year ago, I came up with this design, hoping that one day I could print it out using the Lego Mars. And I did, and it came out amazing. It's the perfect blend between Lego and custom. As I made sure that all of the details were represented and accurate. The cube itself fits into minifigure's hands perfectly with this little cutout that I made, and even the inside ball containing the spell is represented on the model. This honestly turned out to be one of my favorite models I've ever made, and I think especially when it's painted, it looks awesome. And if you think these are awesome as well and you want one, let me know in the comment section below, and I may stick some on my next Whatnot stream so you guys can get some of these in your hands as well. So make sure to go follow me over there, as I will be doing a stream soon. These parts of the model literally wouldn't be possible without 3D printing, and I have zero negative things to say about the Neptune or the Mars Pro. I've bought other 3D printers in the past, and I can highly recommend Elegoo as a fantastic entry point into 3D printing if you're thinking about getting into it. Elegoo haven't paid me to say anything about their printers in these videos, all they've done is sent me the machine for free. There's a section in the description below that lists everything I used in this video. Go there and check out Elegoo, especially if you're at all interested in 3D printing. But speaking of other small details, one thing that I was fairly disappointed about the original set was that they only included 1 cure when there was 4 that needed to be represented. And if I'm honest, it was incredibly difficult to tell whose cure this was. I did make it one of the goals for my model to add all of the cures and make them way more recognizable. These cures ended up looking 10 times better than anything that Lego gave us. And it's funny, because if Lego had included something like this on their original model, it would have given the background a little bit more character and really would have showed that Lego care about the little details. I'm not saying we needed them, it just would have been nice. But hey, at least they gave us the fire extinguisher. Now let's talk about one thing that I kinda skipped over in the main video, and that's lighting. I always say that lighting is a bit of a pain to do, but it's always worth it, and this model is absolutely no exception. The amount of wires all over this thing that I've managed to hide is frankly insane. Although there are some exceptions, all of the wires are hidden throughout the model. One thing I was really worried about was hiding all the wiring all over the scaffolding for the spotlights, but surprisingly turned out to be quite easy using boat tiles underneath the studs, feeding the wires all the way along to one of the back corners of the scaffolding, having it run down a pole all the way to the ground, and then having the wire hide behind the model. I do wish I had thought about this lighting setup a little bit more, as even with all of the animation boards, it's quite difficult to hide all of the wiring, but I go quite in depth on that on my post-mortem video over on my Patreon. But speaking of those animation boards, there's something I do want to talk about here. Now, another company that's been massively supportive in terms of Tommy C Bricks, and obviously Tommy C Figs now as well, is the company Light My Bricks. They're my favorite lighting company when it comes to LEDs for Lego. Yes, they're slightly more expensive than other companies, but honestly, I think it's because the quality quality so high. Yeah, things like flicker effects boards are becoming a lot more common across other companies. I ended up using 2 on this model, one for the jets coming out the back of the Goblin's glider, and another for the back of Electro's lightning. But Light My Bricks specialize in doing a few more things that other companies just simply don't do. Like, look at this. This is a normal bit light. Most companies do this kind of light, and it's the most common LED that you'll see across LEGO lighting kits. It's pretty small, right? Well, now take a look at this. This is one of Light My Bricks' micro bit lights, and LEDs this small really do come in handy when you want to light up things like minifigures' hands, or single stud areas but the only connection point is an anti-stud. They're incredibly useful even if the wires are a bit more bulky. But one thing that I really wanted for this model that no other company does is this 24 individual LED Doctor Strange ring light. This is a custom LED specifically made for Doctor Strange portals. This is why it was really important to me to use a very similar connection type for a Doctor Strange portal that you see on things like the Sanctum Sanctorum. I'll leave a link to the components list that Light My Bricks offer, as well as a link to their YouTube account if you just want to see what other stuff they do. They're worth checking out if you're thinking about lighting up your mocks to give them a little bit of extra life, or even just lighting up your standard LEGO sets. Again, they haven't paid me to say any of this, I just use them a lot and would recommend them. But let's zoom out and end this video with a general look at the entire model. As for the scaffolding, I like how it turned out even if it wasn't what I wanted to do originally. The scaffolding unfortunately suffered from a big fight of cost versus how much I could actually have, and I think I managed to find a in-between that looks good but also didn't cost very much. And although I really wish I could have had more scaffolding, I definitely think this is certainly usable. If I could do this model again, the scaffolding would definitely be something I would redesign, but like a lot of these projects, if you just continue doing what you'd want to be doing, you'd be working on it forever. I know you guys were looking forward to this model for such a long time, but I wanted to have something substantial for you guys to actually see, and I think this version of the scaffolding did its job in getting all of the minifigures up where I wanted them to be, and also supporting the model where it needs to. Speaking of those minifigures, I like where I've put them on the model. Each character has their own little thing that they're doing that's directly related to the film in some way. And although I'm not going to go through all of the minifigures and their differences between their official LEGO counterparts, as there's another video where you can see exactly that, I thought it'd be nice to go through a couple of the more memorable scenes. Of course, there's all 3 Spider-Men stood on the tips of the statue's crown. This scene isn't actually depicted from the film itself, it's more the concept art, which was actually one of the main concept art pieces that inspired this model in the first place. But when the Spider-Men aren't chilling there, I do have some scenes for them to go in. All 3 of them have individual fights in this scene, so I did think it cool to recreate some of them. Like Tom versus Goblin fighting on the glider, or Toby and Lizard fighting on the cranes. And although Andrew does have a fight with Electro, which is depicted on the top of the head for this scene, I thought it best to give Andrew the moment where he catches MJ from falling off the top of the scaffolding. And hey, if I wanted to put Andrew at the top of the head, MJ and Ned both have a spot to go on the center of the statue. Where looking through the Doctor Strange portal, you can see Midtown High, just like you can in the film. This whole model turned out to be one of the biggest projects I've ever made. And I'm not just talking about the LEGO model itself, I'm talking these videos. Never before have I spent 2.5 months working on a project, and that's not even counting the 1.5 to 2 years of collecting parts for this model. It's crazy to me that I can call this model done and it almost finish an era of Tommy C. Briggs. It's like I said before, there is so much that I wanted to do to this model, but just didn't end up having the time to do so. Otherwise, this project never would have come out for you guys to actually watch. But if you do care about seeing that kind of stuff, I did do a post-mortem video over on the Patreon where I talk about all the things I'm really happy with and the things that I'd change on this model if I could do it again. For now, if you haven't seen the main video and you want to go and check that out, or you haven't seen the minifig video where I talk about all of the minifigures that I used on this model, they're appearing on screen now. Thanks to everybody again for watching this video and all the support throughout this entire process. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.